everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Allie. If you're new, hello. If you're returning, welcome back. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. It is somehow already the end of June, so it is time for another reading wrap-up. This month was like another pretty good reading month. I am getting off my reading slump. I was gonna say kick of not reading, but reading slump makes more sense. We read 10 books this month, which is not bad. I'm officially, I think, 3 or 4 books ahead of my reading goal, so we're doing a good job. We went from like 3 or 4 books behind to ahead. For last month's TBR, read a solid amount of it. There's some that I still didn't get to. I still haven't read, I believe I put Bury Our Bones in Midnight Soil on my TBR for last month. I don't think I got to that, but I got to a fair amount. So, TBR-wise, we also did a pretty good job of staying on track. Starting off, we have one of my favorite books ever. Probably for sure going to be one of my favorite books of the year, but genuinely one of my favorite books I've ever read in my entire life. The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. I loved this so much that I ordered a second version online because my Barnes & Noble was sold out of their like sprayed edges version, so I went online and ordered that. So I now have like my original one that I have all annotated, and then I also have the fancy pretty one. I'm not kidding, I would pay like the Fairy Loot scalpers like the $300 for the Fairy Loot version of this book. I'm not kidding, I would spend my life savings on all of the covers for this book. I adore it. I just love Rachel Gillig. I think that what she's bringing to the world was very needed. She's just very good at coming up with unique storylines and magic systems. Nothing ever feels the same cookie cutter. I also think just put this in my video last week for my top 5 of 2025. So you can check that out if you want to see my other kind of favorite books for the year, but Night and the Moth for sure is one of them. If you haven't read this book, don't know anything about it somehow, this book is, how do I want to describe it other than incredible? This follows Sybil. Sybil is a diviner where everything, the magic system-wise, is based off of divination, which is like dream magic. So Sybil has the power to like interpret dreams, and she is kept at this church thing to interpret dreams. There is currently 6 diviners, and one day she wakes up and all the other diviners start going missing. No traces of them whatsoever. So she meets up with a knight who is emo and broody and oh so cute to have him help her figure out where all of her divining sisters have gone, and it's their romance. Also, Bartholomew. One of the best things about this book is Gargoyle. Bartholomew, I love him. So yeah, if you have not read this book, please check it out, especially if you really liked One Dark Window. Intimidated by Rachel Gillig, I do think Night and the Moth would be like a simpler place to start other than One Dark Window, because this at least right now is a standalone, where One Dark Window is a duology, so it's a little bit more like intense, but I adore this book. For people that say this book has no romance, you don't understand what romance is. This book is nothing but yearning and love, and it's incredible. The scene where they're making her armor, one of the best scenes I've ever read, I think about it all the time. This book is incredible. Please, for the love of God, if you're going to read anything I've ever recommended to you, please read this book. It's incredible. People love it for a very good and very valid reason. So, if you haven't read it yet, check it out. Night and Moth by Rachel Gillig. Then, switching gears, because I was kind of in a fantasy mood slump after Night and the Moth. I haven't just read a romance in a while, and I had just gotten and was on my TBR, Problematic Summer Romance by Ellie Hazelwood. This one was okay. This was like a 3.5 star for me. It wasn't my favorite thing she's ever read, but it wasn't bad. This is an age gap romance. It's like brother's best friend age gap romance, which like, I don't mind the tropes of it. I'm fine with an age gap romance. Totally fine with a brother's best friend. I just wasn't super connected to the characters in this story. I felt like the male main character just wasn't that appealing to me. Ellie Hazelwood is still one of my favorite authors, and I will buy anything she ever writes regardless, but it wasn't my favorite thing of hers, but I don't hate it. This follows Maya. She is going to a destination wedding for her brother, her soon-to-be sister-in-law. Connor, her brother's best friend, and a man that she's had a crush on her whole life, is also invited because he's their best man, and they are now forced proximity together on this tiny island, and having to deal with their attraction to each other, and whether or not they care about the social acceptability-ness of it all. Wasn't super my jam, but it wasn't bad. If you're looking for just like a nice little breezy summer romance, there you go. Problematic Summer Romance by Ellie Hazelwood. Ha ha ha. We then have kind of like a gear switch in, not necessarily, I don't know. We had a little bit of a gear switch. I then read Wings of Starlight by Alison Shaft. This is a Pixie Hollow book. I am a Pixie Hollow girl to my core. I have always been a fairies and mermaids girl. I have never been like an emo. I've never had an emo phase. I wanted to because everybody else was and it was cool, but I genuinely never had it. I've always been a like sparkles and rainbows and fairies and mermaids and butterflies. Any sort of like fairy book as a child, I adored. I did the Pixie Hollow like online game where you made your own little Pixie Hollow. It was like Club Penguin but Pixie Hollow. But yeah, they finally came out with the book for Queen Clarion and her romance. You get like a intro to this love story in, I believe, Secret of the Wings, where you meet the like king keeper of the winter and he has like broken wings and you're like, whoa, and it's like implied that they had romance. But this is the book about it and it was so cute. Also, the cover is stunning. Look at the artwork. Some beautiful ass artwork. Is this the most, like, high fantasy thing you'll ever read? No, I think this is actually marketed for, like, middle grade teens. So it was a very quick read. It's very short chapters, very big words on a page. So it did not take long to read, but it was still really cute. I think I gave this, like, a 4-star because, like, it hits for nostalgia. And if you're a Pixie Hollow girl, I think you really like it. If you're just kind of picking it up because it looks cool, it might not be your favorite thing. And I definitely think that me at almost 26 and maybe a little bit too old of an audience for it, but it was still really good and I loved their romance and I'm so happy that this was written. So, if you are a Pixie Hollow girl and you haven't read this one yet, I highly, highly suggest it. It was really good. So, here's the Starlight by Allison Saft. We're now getting into a area where I kind of like switched genres every 3 seconds with what I read for like the next 4 or 5 books. I read my first, is this an autobiography or is this a memoir? One of the two. But I read Autopsy of an Ex-Teenage Heartthrob by Ivan Joga. He played Beck in Victorious. He was, I think, pretty much every girl's childhood crush. He wrote a little, like, memoir thing. It is a lot of, like, short stories and poems. I don't like to rate people's, like, memoirs and stuff because it's people's life story. It's not necessarily there for entertainment. It's just, like, their thoughts and feelings. But if you look at something like this versus I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, they are definitely very different. This still does have trigger warnings and needs to be looked up, but they are definitely very different. I think Jeanette McCurdy's was a lot more of like an expose type thing, where Ivan Joga is more just like personal and inner thoughts. So I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my favorite thing I ever read. And I'm not super big into poetry, and it is a lot of poetry based, but it was still really good and really interested to kind of see his inner thoughts during the time. I always think that's interesting. I am really into the current era we're in of people that you grew up watching now being adults and having their contracts run up and now they can tell us what actually happened. I'm actually enjoying that part of my life. But if you are a memoir person and you like stuff like Jeanette McCurdy's book, I do think you should read it. But yeah, that was a little bit of a genre switch, but Autopsy by Ivan Joga. We then switch again to more of a classic type thing. I have a whole shelf of like banned books in my house and I've only read about half of them. So I'm trying to force myself to read at least one of the books on my banned book list a month, whether it's a big one or a small one. I want to make myself read at least one of them a month. This month I read Tender is the Flesh. This, I feel like, is a classic that a lot of people have talked about and is a banned book. It wasn't my favorite thing I ever read. I think this was like a 3.5 for me. It definitely is interesting, but it's not necessarily for me. It is very uncomfortable. It's a book that I think you should read trigger warnings for. For it being as short as it is, it like was uncomfortable. I thought about things, but I don't think it was like as thought-provoking as I thought it was going to be. But yeah, I did read it. I didn't hate it, but it did feel a little bit like an English class book, I guess. But yeah, I did read Tender is the Flesh, so that is one more book on my banned book list off the way. Another vibe switch, I went back to a book that I actually read about at least a year ago, probably close to 2. But I reread Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I, again, read the first book at least a year ago, and I really liked it. And then it was just, the rest of the series got lost in the sauce. I started a bunch of other stuff and never got back into it. This is like a sci-fi dystopian book, so there's a lot of like world building and like, it's a book where like if you're not paying attention for like a page, you're gonna be completely lost. So it was a thing of like, I remembered bits and pieces, but I didn't think I remembered enough to be able to go right back into the second book and completely understand what was going on. So I wanted to do a reread of it. I liked it just as much as I did read it the first time. It's just like a 4-star. Like, I'm a fantasy person, but I'm not always big into sci-fi, and I really enjoyed this. I definitely am going to read the second book this month. I want to stay more on top of it, so I don't have to reread this book again the first time for a third time. But also, I did do a little crafty craft with this book that I'll have a video coming out with in a couple weeks. So if you're a Red Rising girly and you have read it, I do have a little something special for this book specifically coming out in a couple weeks, so keep your eye out for that. But this is sci-fi dystopian. This is millions of years in the future. Basically, Earth has kind of died. We're now, like, terraforming Mars, and everybody's living on all of the other planets throughout the rest of the solar system. And how, like, Hunger Games, everything is districts. You're kind of, like, classed by what planet you live on. And our main male character is taken from Mars, one of the lower class planets, and is basically turned into a gold, a high class planet, to like infiltrate their government and take them down from the inside. Very high stakes, but I really enjoyed it. For, again, not being a super big sci-fi person, I really enjoyed it, and I highly suggest you read it. This is a lot of people's favorite books, or like favorite series, and I can see why. So I'm really excited to finish the rest of it. Sci-fi this month, we read Red Rising again, and I loved it. Going back to just general fantasy, I read Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This has been on my TBR for a couple years. I just never picked it up, and for whatever reason, I decided to read it this month. This is like fantasy, but it's all superheroes. So like there's a magic system and stuff, but they're just superheroes. It's everybody has a superpower, and you're either like a good guy or a villain. All of the good guys are like basically now the police force and everything, and you have the villains that are trying to obviously be villains and kill them all. This was, for as big as it is, it's a pretty thick book. It was a pretty quick read, because again, I think this is a little bit more like middle grade feeling to me, but it was pretty interesting. I didn't know a lot about it going into it, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't expecting it to be nothing but superheroes, and superheroes isn't fully my game, but I didn't hate it. I did get the second one, because I do like it enough to keep reading it. I believe this is a 3-book series. This follows Nova, who has superpowers and ends up becoming a villain. She has like a vendetta against the good guys, the Renegades. The Renegades are the good guys. She has like a vendetta against them because they didn't help her family in the time she needed it most, and now doesn't believe that they are doing the job they're supposed to be doing, so she becomes a evil supervillain, trying to destroy them. She figures out that the best way to do that is from the inside. She competes in their little like application trial process to become a renegade and join the good guy team, while also being a double agent and giving all of their information to the bad guys to help take them down. There's romance in it, found family, and it's just very cool. I enjoyed it. I thought it was just like kind of a breath of fresh air in the fantasy space of it not just being magical fairies. So, if you want kind of a easier fantasy that's something a little bit different, I highly suggest this if you haven't yet. I enjoyed it. I think this was like a 4, this is a 3.5 or a 4-star for me. But I enjoyed it. I don't know. I think I liked it more than I thought I would. I don't know, but I did like it. Staying on the fantasy train, I read the second book of the saga of Unfated. I read A Curse Carven Bone. I read Fate Inked in Blood last month. So I went right into the second one this month, and I actually really enjoyed it. I was a little nervous going into this because a lot of people a little bit disappointed in this book. They didn't think it was as good as the first one. Do I agree? Yes. But do I think this was bad? No. A lot of people were saying like the banter in this was a lot less, and just like it didn't have the romance that it had in the first book. I do think there was maybe less romance of it, but it was also because they were on a full-out war. My one thing, though, as I do feel like this book is a little rushed, this book, for being the second one and, like, closing up and doing the whole big war, is, like, 100 pages shorter than the first one, which I was like, that's kind of weird for this being what's tying everything up and having a big whole war in it. I would expect it to be longer. So there were some times that I thought stuff was a little bit rushed than what it could have been. I thought that, like, the final battle could have been more intense than it was. I feel like everything just kind of wrapped up really quick, but I do like the way that it ended. I don't want to get too much into this book specifically, because this is obviously the second in a series, and it'll spoil things from the first one, but this is a duology, a Viking romance, enemies to lovers, Norse gods, all of that cool stuff. I love a Viking romance, and this is one of my favorite ones to do it. So, if you want, again, a fantasy book that's different from just fairies and stuff, I really highly suggest this one. And it does, especially the first book, have really, really good banter. So, If you're a banter fantasy girly, I highly suggest this series. The only other little romance book that I read this month was Slipstream by Madge Marl. This is one that my partner picked out when we were walking around Barnes & Noble. He is a big F1 guy, which makes sense because a few weeks ago I did the Day in Motorsports where I read F1 books for an entire weekend while he was watching all of his races. But he saw this one and thought it was cute. I do really like the cover of it. The cover is like one of my favorite little ones, like animated sports covers I've seen in a while. I read this. This is like a solid 3 stars. I didn't hate it. It wasn't incredible. Nothing for me has beat the Dirty Air series in terms of like F1 romance, but compared to the 3 that I read like a month ago that were just 90% romance and just let me occasionally drive a car for 3 seconds once, it was a lot better than those. Liked the premise of this a little bit better. I feel like a lot of F1 books right now are like, I'm the team owner's daughter, and we can't be together because I'm the team owner's daughter, but I'm also really hot, and I love you, F1 driver. I feel like that's the premise of like most F1 romance books. I thought this one was really unique because it is film production team. They're trying to make a documentary for this F1 team, and one of the drivers is trying to actually get out of his contract with this team. He doesn't like it. He wants to race for another team, so he's trying to sabotage this documentary purposely because he wants this team to fire him so that he can have an open seat and go to a different team. At the same time, our female main character ends up like breaking up with her boyfriend that also works on this production team, so she kind of wants to also sabotage this documentary as revenge to make like him look bad as a producer. So it's the two of them trying to sabotage a documentary, working together, and then eventually falling in love. There's fake dating, friends to lovers, all of that stuff. So I liked the premise of this a lot better than just my dad owns the team and I'm hot. Nothing for me has yet to beat Dirty Air, even though that is a I'm the teammate's daughter thing that I was just crapping on. But you know, hey, different strokes for different folks, am I right? But yeah, if you like F1 romance, I do really suggest this one. This has been one of my favorite ones that I've read in a hot minute, and I just read a lot in a short amount of time. And then last but not least, this actually took me pretty much the whole month to read. This was my book club's book, but I read Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. I enjoyed this. I was not sure how I was going to feel about it going in. I didn't really know a lot about it. I just knew that it was super popular. It was kind of like the first time I read Red Rising. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, but I knew a lot of people did. I would say that the first section of the book, because this is like section 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever parts, I would say like the first part was really slow and it took me a minute to go through because it's just a lot of world building, and this has a very like intense magic system. So I'd say the first part took me a little bit to get through, but once I got through the first part and like understood the world around me, I really enjoyed it. This, I think I 4.5'd. I annotated some of it. I cried in this book, genuinely. I loved this so much more than I thought I would. This is another like fantasy dystopian. It might even be considered sci-fi. Mistborn are able to like burn metals. Every metal has a different power. Like gold does something different than like copper or iron, or like pewter makes you really strong. It like temporarily enhances your muscles. So it's just this whole magic system of, it's kind of hard to learn because you have to remember the rules of every single different thing. The whole premise of this is they're trying to overthrow the government and free a bunch of enslaved people, and it's a moral question of who's right and who's wrong. I love this book. The romance in it got me. The romance doesn't happen till like the second part at least, and this man said like one line and I was hooked. I was in love with it. I don't really know what else to say. I got the second book, so regardless if my book club reads the second book next, I will on my own time. It is a very big, intimidating looking book. Genuinely, once you get into it, you never stop thinking about it. I also highly suggest the audiobook for this. The audiobook does a really good job at like pronunciations that seem a little weird when you just read them on paper. And at least the print version, I think my Kindle version does too, but the print version and everything has like a glossary in the back to help you keep track of all of the different terms and shit that they be talking about. So, last book of the month that I finished, I really enjoyed it, which was Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So, here's everything that we read this month. It was a pretty good reading month. There wasn't any DNFs or anything that I didn't like. There was a couple 5 stars, some new favorites, starting some new series that I'm going to continue getting into. Yeah, all in all, I am really happy about our books this month. Going into next month, TBR-wise, do want to read Golden Sun, the second book for Red Rising. I would love to at least start, I believe it's The Wall of Ascension is the second Mistborn book. I would at least love to start those. Those are both kind of intense, in-depth books that might take a bit. I do want to read this month Burial Bones in the Midnight Soil. I was supposed to read that this month and I didn't. So I want to get to that for sure. I also just started Babel by R.F. Kuang today. I am on chapter 8. I am on page 133. So I will definitely probably have this finished this month. So far my TBR is all very intense, high-stakes fantasy shit. So I have done a couple book hauls though recently, and I have a lot of things to choose from, so other than these three, I think it'll be kind of a go by vibes month to see how much high stakes shit my brain can process. That'll at least be our goals for this month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you guys read anything that I read this month, let me know your thoughts. What did you guys read? Send me any recommendations of things you think I should read for this coming July. And yeah, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I love and appreciate you so much. Stay safe. If you want to follow me anywhere, all of my stuff is linked down below. I just updated my Pango, so you can check out stuff on there if you're looking for any secondhand books. But yeah. I love you. Please stay safe. Have a good, happy reading month, regardless of how much you read. I'm proud of you for doing it. And I love you. Stay safe. I will see you guys next week or somewhere else on the internet.